Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. We would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the indigenous lands of Turtle Island, the ancestral name for the landmass known as North America, and indigenous peoples that have acted as stewards for this land for thousands of years. I'm currently speaking to you from the homelands of the Nukotchtank people, and I invite you to put the name of the people who are the traditional caretakers of the land where you sit in the chat. You can find the link to that in the chat as well. We acknowledge the long and complex history that brought us to reside on this land, and we seek to evaluate the ongoing effects of colonization and our participation in that process. We honor the elders who have been caretakers of the lands and waters, indigenous people today, and those generations who will come. We also acknowledge that the economy, which some of us have benefited from, and which continue to enrich a small group of people with varying privileges, was built by and on the backs of enslaved Africans, exploited immigrants, and indigenous people. We acknowledge the harm inflicted on Black, Indigenous, and other people of color in the name of capitalism, and dedicate our work to reversing these harmful historical trends and building an economy that works for all of us. Thank you all for taking the time. Now I'm super excited to introduce SEIU Executive Vice President and leader of our climate and environmental justice work, Rocio Saenz.
Thank you so much, Sherry. This is so great to be here. Hello, SEIU family. It's just wonderful to welcome you all here. I'm gonna ask everyone, can we take everyone off mute so I can hear you all? And let me just say, when we fight,
we win.
We win. We vote.
Yeah.
We
win.
win.
We
win.
We
fight.
We
win.
You're on mute, Rocio.
I got the unmute button now. Can you hear me? Yes. It's really an honor to be here and welcome you all to our third annual SEIU Climate Summit. Climate, jobs, and justice. What a theme for us today. That is the dream that unites us all. Every day we fight for our unions for all. We're fighting to ensure that every worker, no matter the color of their skin, where they live, where they were born, has the opportunity to live in dignity and to build a brighter future. It's so exciting to see hundreds of our members coming together from coast to coast, Puerto Rico and Canada, to engage in deep learning and collaboration to address the growing impact of climate change. And just as important, what we can do about it and what we are doing about it, because I know that so many of you are really leading the way on this work. So if you're attending this summit for the first time or are new to this work, welcome. This is just great to see many of you here, because we know from record-breaking flooding, rainfall, snowfall in California, a state that was not so long ago battling wildfires and drought, to increasingly deadly hurricanes in Florida and Puerto Rico, and unprecedented heat domes as far as Ontario and Quebec. Extreme weather is wreaking havoc everywhere. It affects all us. And you know what? You know this. It will take all of us to change the status quo. While this challenge can be truly overwhelming, the great thing about being in a union is that we are never alone, and we know about power. We know about the power of coming together. We know that when we unite, we can make change. We are stronger together. Soon, we will hear from some inspirational words from SEIU International President Mary Kay Henry. And later on, we will hear from our amazing keynote speakers, who are none other than Michael Regan, the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, and Congresswoman Cori Bush of Missouri. We're really honored to have them with us today. So let's just hear incredible welcome to them and for being with us, knowing that they are taking time out of their busy schedule to be with us today in this important summit. So following our featured speakers, we will have a panel that will go deep into the intersection between racial, climate, and environmental justice. And then later on, we will have an opportunity to collaborate within our divisions during breakout discussions. But before we move on, I want to tell you about the exciting work that was done in 2022 by all of you, by our locals and members in fighting for climate justice, good union jobs, and lifting up our communities. Our SEIU Climate and Environmental Justice Committee continues to grow, with the newest local union addition being Healthcare Illinois. Welcome, the Committee of Interns and Residents, and Local 1 Ontario, Canada, bringing the committee to 23 participating locals. I want to also recognize here to my sister, Maria Castaneda from 1199, as she chairs this committee. Thank you for your work and for all the committee members who are working really hard. But I want to just also say that in addition, member-led local union environmental justice committee now exists in 10 of our locals. Really amazing work. So let me go nationally. After 2 years of uniting with partners, demanding a strong federal action on climate, care, and other critical issues, we won the game-changing, unprecedented Inflation Reduction Act. The IRA, as is known, is a $370 billion with a B dollars package, delivering hundreds of thousands of good union green jobs while investing billions into lower income communities of color. While the legislation lacks some important priorities for our union, this is the single largest dollar amount in history directed at addressing climate change, and its narrow passage in Congress is a credit to the work that you all are doing, because we also know how important the power of voting it has been. Now, let me go to the state. At the state and cities, our locals have united with partners to win a strong legislation and pass propositions to improve our environment while creating good union jobs. And finally, SEIU members are taking the fight for a cleaner, safer environment into our workplaces. In our Property Services Division, we're making a difference through our Green Janitor and 1,000 Green Supers training programs. And we have another airports initiative aimed at reducing emission and the impact of aviation-related pollution on local communities. In our healthcare division, we're training home care members on what to do in the instance of climate disasters such as wildfires, hurricanes, and extreme heat. And we will soon be launching a new program to make our hospitals cleaner, safer, and more energy efficient. In our public sector division, we're bargaining for sustainability and more resilient communities. We also have an enormous opportunity to use federal money from the Inflation Reduction Act to improve our public buildings, including our schools with solar power and more energy efficient buildings. We will hear more about these incredible efforts during our breakouts. But first, let's watch a short video that highlights the great progress we have made together in 2022. And this video, these highlights, they are dedicated to you. Thank you for all your amazing work and leadership, and hope you will enjoy today's summit. So let's roll the video.
In 2016, SEIU members from around the country adopted the fight for environmental justice as one of our core priorities.
Access to clean air, clean water are basic human rights.
Since then, our movement has continued to gain momentum as we pushed elected leaders to take bold action on climate change. Our work contributed to passage of the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. It sets aside $370 billion to combat climate change and pollution, especially for working families and in communities of color. This landmark legislation will help us realize our commitments to slowing climate change. These new resources, a bold federal commitment to combat climate change, and strong action from the states and our partners will enable SEIU locals to build on existing environmental programs and create new ones. Now let's take a look at the last year where SEIU was instrumental in creating new and expanding existing green janitor programs, advancing state and local initiatives to address climate change and pollution, fighting for bold federal climate and care legislation, expanding caregiver resiliency programs, building new and strengthening existing labor-climate alliances, responding to the growing number of natural disasters that have affected our communities, and using our collective voice to reduce energy use and promote sustainability in healthcare facilities. Study after study has shown that if we don't act now, the impacts of climate change will only get worse. But SEIU members are up to the challenge. Together, we will continue to call on the Biden administration to enact additional rules that will cut climate pollution in half by 2030, to advance vital public health and environmental justice goals, to accelerate the transition to clean energy, and to create new economic opportunities. By coming together, we can heal our planet and transform our communities. Let's continue our great work and look forward to the future as we bring this fight to the next level.
This is just so amazing. I'm so great to see all the work that you have done. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our SEIU President, Mary Kay Henry, who has just continued to stay focused in building worker power so we can win for everyone. So with that, President Henry, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Executive Vice President Rocio Saenz. And it is my great honor to join the climate justice warriors from all across SEIU, together with our allies. I am so proud that we are doing this summit in over 7 languages, and we have such impressive guests like the Director Reagan from EPA and the Congresswoman who will follow me. I'm incredibly proud of how every member of SEIU, from Canada to Puerto Rico to every state in the US, from the West Coast to the East Coast, is addressing the pressing issue of climate change and environmental justice and the creation of new union clean energy jobs. Our communities of every race, Black, Brown, Asian, Indigenous, immigrant, working class and poor communities have been hit hardest by the climate crisis and toxic pollution, with many of our members residing in areas that are most affected by these challenges. Yet, these communities often lack the resources to effectively respond when disaster strikes. Environmental justice seeks to confront the undeniable and inextricably linked racial and economic disparities that stem from climate change and pollution. The reality is that low-income individuals and people of color bear the brunt of these consequences, while the wealthy, as we know in all aspects of our union's work, are able to insulate themselves from the worst impacts. Contrary to popular belief, climate change does not affect everyone equally. Natural disasters like hurricanes, floods, wildfires, and heat waves disproportionately land on our members and their communities, those with fewer resources. Today's panel will explore the intersection of racial, climate, environmental justice, an essential conversation for our movement. As we fight for unions for all workers, no matter what job they do, we know that with more workers in unions, it will give SEIU and the entire labor movement and every community and our democracy the power to demand climate change legislation and policies. The strength of our collective voice will be crucial in promoting green jobs and a just transition to a clean energy economy. By mobilizing in solidarity, we can amplify our message and hold corporations and politicians accountable for their role in environmental degradation. We've made remarkable progress. We just saw that incredible video, but now it's time to elevate our fight. We must integrate the struggle for climate and environmental justice into our workplaces. SEIU members work in many diverse settings, from commercial offices to multifamily and public buildings, to hospitals, nursing homes, clinics, airports, and even the homes of elders and people with disabilities that our home care workers care for, and child care centers that our child care family providers do in their homes. Our union is uniquely positioned to help create cleaner, safer, and more environmentally sustainable workplaces. Let us be inspired by Joanne Houston and her fellow SEIU members who took action to reduce lung-damaging pollution at LAX Airport. And let us be inspired by all those members that we saw on that video and each and every one of you gathered here today. Later today, we will hear more about the efforts from our members in creating sustainable and resilient workplaces. As we become environmental stewards through our work, we will also continue to collaborate with environmental and labor partners to advocate for more robust legislation in our states and cities. This legislation should aim to reduce emissions, create good union jobs, and prioritize investments in communities that need them most. I commend SEIU Locals 32BJ and 1199 UHE for their recent victory in New York State with Proposition 1. You should shout yourselves out in the chat, which will allocate hundreds of millions of dollars for clean energy, enforce union standards, and invest in our members' communities. Despite the dire predictions about climate change, I'm incredibly inspired by your actions to combat it. Every step that we can take generates a positive ripple effect, encouraging others in our union, in our families, and in our communities to do more and take action to strive for better. Together, we can make a profound difference and reshape the narrative to reflect a healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable future. Thank you for all your dedication and participation. Let's make this summit a big catalyst for change and reinforce Rocio's chant that when we fight together, we can win big things together, and we can leave this world a better and more equitable and more sustainable place for the next generation. Now, we have a special message from Administrator Michael Reagan, the leader of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency.
Hello, everyone. It's great to join you all virtually. Congratulations to the Service Employees International Union on your third annual Climate Justice and Jobs Summit. Thanks especially to SEIU President Mary Kay Henry for the invitation. I'd like to express my gratitude to SEIU for your tireless efforts to protect and empower workers across the country. By investing in innovative and smart climate solutions and advocating for strong environmental legislation, SEIU members are working to build a cleaner, healthier, and more equitable future for all. Your advocacy and support for President Biden's transformative vision for our nation has led to important victories like the Inflation Reduction Act. And we are moving quickly to implement programs and distribute funding that prioritizes overburdened communities who unjustly bear the burden of pollution. This unprecedented funding will not only protect public health and safeguard the environment, but it will also stimulate local job creation in the communities across the country. And as part of President Biden's Justice 40 initiative, we are ensuring these resources reach communities that need them the most. In your roles as healthcare, home care, child care, property service, and public workers, SEIU members play an essential role in helping to combat some of the greatest environmental challenges of our time. As we work together to create a more sustainable and equitable future, we must ensure that workers' voices and perspectives are heard and reflected in our work and decision making. Thanks again for inviting me to join you. I hope you have a productive summit.
That was a great message from Michael Regan. And I just want to say, President Henry, thank you so much for inspiring us, for continue to fight. When we fight, we win. When we vote, we win. When we organize, we win. So thank you again. So now I'm very thrilled to welcome Congresswoman Cori Bush, who represents Missouri's 1st District. Congresswoman Bush is a registered nurse, community organizer, an activist and single mother, and ordained pastor. She is the first Black woman and first nurse to represent the people of Missouri's 1st Congressional District. Congresswoman Bush is also a fierce climate and environmental champion. She authored and introduced the Green New Deal for Cities Act to make investment in local communities and jobs working to address the climate crisis. In 2022, she fought for $110.5 million to aid the use of Defense Production Act in producing clean energy technologies and has secured over $82 million in disaster recovery funding for the St. Louis region. She's joining us today to advocate on behalf of her St. Louis constituents and everyone negatively impacted by climate change. Welcome, Congresswoman, and thank you so much for your leadership and for moving us forward. Welcome.
Thank you, and good morning. Thank you so much, SEIU Executive Vice President Rocio Signs. Thank you for the lovely introduction and for your kindness and for this invitation. Let me also shout out my friend and SEIU's fearless leader, President Mary Kay Henry. And I also gotta say thank you to every single SEIU member joining us today, with special gratitude to members out in Missouri at SEIU Local 1. I'm not sure if you can hear it, but it's a thunderstorm just started to come down. So if you hear something clapping behind me, that's the thunder and the lightning. But thank you to every advocate and every organization that's represented. And it is great that we had a moment to see our EPA Administrator Regan on here. He has been a critical partner to St. Louis and to my office during his tenure. Whenever we call, he's there, and so is his office. I'm so excited to be speaking with you all and grateful that a space like this Climate Day Summit exists and the way that we started off, giving honor to whose land, where we all sit. Thank you for making this space a space that allows conversation and critical thinking on the often overlooked intersection of climate change and environmental justice with economic, with racial, and immigrant justice. By now, we all know that the health of our planet is fleeting. All you have to do is step outside and feel the seasons getting shorter. And in some cases, you have several seasons in a day. I know if you live where I live, or even when I'm in DC sometimes. And then we also see how the temperatures are getting higher. You just have to turn on the news to see the latest natural disaster devastating communities. You just have to listen to the scientists and the climate experts who are telling us point blank that it is now or never. Act today or wish you had yesterday. My hometown of St. Louis ranks among the highest across the country in rates of asthma. I suffer with it myself. We have asthma rates that are significantly higher for Black residents than white residents. In St. Louis City, Black children are over 2 times more likely to test positive for lead in their blood than white children. In St. Louis County, residents are dealing with the harms of radioactive waste that was dumped. This was purposely, it was dumped nearly a century ago in a creek that runs through our community. In fact, just last week, we were featured on ABC News talking about how a local elementary school that is 80% Black had to close due to the presence of radioactive waste in and around where our children ate, where our children played, and where they learned. Horrifying. And this is not a new elementary school. Let me just make that point clear. In my home of St. Louis, we do not only see the impact of climate change, we feel it, we breathe it, we live it. And I know St. Louis is not alone. There are communities all across our country, like many of yours, that are dealing with the same kinds of devastating impacts and effects of climate change. In fact, for many communities, especially Black and Brown and Indigenous communities, the effects of climate change are so ingrained in our everyday life that sometimes people don't even realize that it's there. I'm speaking from experience. I'm one of those people. For far too long, that was me. Before I became an activist, I understood that climate change was a problem, but I didn't see it as my problem. In my view, I had bigger fish to fry. I thought, yes, the climate crisis is bad. And if we don't do something, we could die. I thought that. I had heard that. But in the future, we could die in the future. It was long off. It's nothing I needed to do now. It was hard for me to feel that urgency when I saw how people in my community were dying now from so many other forms of violence. As an activist in the movement to save Black lives, I saw people in my community continue to be killed by gun violence and police violence. As a registered nurse, I saw the racial health disparities I mentioned earlier firsthand. As a formerly unhoused person who slept out of a car with my 2 babies, I know all too well what it feels like to be unable to keep up with your rent and your energy bills because the costs are too high and they keep getting higher year after year. I have a deep and thorough understanding of the injustices that impact Black and Brown communities and other marginalized communities around the country. What I failed to realize then, but I certainly realize now, is that all these issues I named and more have a very direct correlation to the climate crisis. Gun violence, police violence, health disparities, and so on are a direct result of environmental injustice, not an indicator of it. On average, Black and Brown people live in communities that are several degrees hotter than predominantly white communities. We are more likely to live near big polluters that spew toxins and chemicals in the air. We are more likely to face the burden of higher rent, transportation barriers, having our utilities shut off. All of this is an environmental issue, just as it is an economic and racial one. That is why when we meet in wonderful forums like this, and when we debate over the ways in which we choose to tackle the climate crisis, as we choose to tackle climate change, it is critical that we start by looking at the policy solutions and investments that address the communities that are on the front lines of this climate crisis. And on the front lines of the climate crisis are our workers. From healthcare workers to childcare workers to janitors to cafeteria workers to airport workers to teachers. Service workers are often still on duty, even in times of crisis. So as the climate crisis continues to accelerate and extreme weather and climate disasters become more frequent and more severe, as we are told today, we're about to have some really severe weather in St. Louis, Our frontline workers and frontline communities are put at most risk. A little over a year ago, just outside my district in Edwardsville, Illinois, a tornado struck an Amazon warehouse. I don't know if you all remember this. It struck an Amazon warehouse and killed 6 people, including 2 of my constituents. They died. They died because Amazon did not allow them to leave work. And they were left with no place to seek shelter. The safety of our workers, especially our most marginalized workers, especially our workers who are most vulnerable, it should always be our top priority. That is why I have introduced 2 pieces of legislation to protect workers by developing worker safety standards in the event of climate disasters and extreme weather. The first being the Worker Safety and Climate Disasters Act, which would prevent workers from being fired for seeking shelter during disasters, as well as offer paid time off for workers affected by those disasters, much needed. The second being the Wind Safety Standard Act, which will require the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, OSHA, to create a wind safety standard modeled after the heat safety standard to protect workers that are put in danger in the workplace due to high wind conditions. I introduced both of these bills, not only in response to what happened to my constituents and all the 6 that died in Edwardsville, but because I know what happened in Edwardsville was not an aberration. And without continued action, it will become a regularity. I also know that we cannot fully protect our workers from the effects of the climate crisis if we don't also proactively make massive investments to curb it. That means investing in equitable climate job opportunities across all industries. So right now, I am in the process of revamping and reintroducing my Green New Deal for Cities, which we heard our great EVP just speak about. The Green New Deal for Cities is legislation that is about to bring the Green New Deal directly to our neighborhoods, with over $1 trillion in federal investments to local governments to combat the climate crisis. This legislation will provide communities, so those groups and folks already doing the work will provide communities and organizations with what is needed to make real, long-lasting investments. And it's about building an economy that's built towards the future, a future that is filled with good paying jobs in a green economy. We're talking about investing $1 trillion in environmental projects that will create construction jobs, transportation jobs, public health jobs, weatherization jobs, hazardous waste cleanup jobs, and the list goes on and on. This is a jobs bill. For all of the thousands and thousands of jobs created, each will be sure to include high quality labor standards such as prevailing wages, employer neutrality requirements, and more. Just as the PRO Act is a climate bill, the Green New Deal for Cities is a workers' bill. My office and I are constantly meeting with advocates on the ground, locally and around the country, to hear about the work that they are doing to address this crisis. The federal government has an obligation to provide resources and solutions to the climate crisis at every opportunity. Congress must ensure that with each piece of legislation that we put forward, that there is a component, there has to be some component to it that addresses the climate crisis. I feel grateful to know that there are some amazing climate champions in Congress fighting the fight alongside us and putting forth legislation that will help heal our planet. Already, we've seen Congress make steps towards tackling this crisis through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, which I am proud to say included mine and Senator Ed Markey's Environmental Justice Mapping and Data Collection Act, which effectively authorized funding for data collection on the disproportionate environmental and climate harms, as well as the cumulative impacts of pollution and rising temperatures. This data will assist the Biden administration and Congress in directing at least 40%, or Justice 40 that we talk about, in directing at least the 40% of investments for a clean and climate safe future into the communities that have been harmed by racist and unjust environmental practices. I'm proud of all the strides that we have made thus far, but of course, I recognize there's still a ways to go. Workers continue to face a multitude of challenges as this crisis looms. That is why I'm prepared to utilize the full power of my congressional seat, including as the top Democrat on the Oversight Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Energy Policy, and Regulatory Affairs, to rein in big oil, rein in big plastic, and other industries that pollute the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the land that sustains us. But I need your help. Each and every one of us has a role to play in ending this climate crisis. So when you organize in support of legislation that advances climate and environmental justice priorities, that helps us. We're working together. As you look to your own communities, as you connect with the people on the ground who are doing the work even more and are doing this work for a more sustainable and equitable future, as you elevate and elect more climate justice leaders into positions of power, or better yet, run for office yourself as a climate justice warrior, however you are working, that organization and mobilizing and galvanizing pushes us as elected officials to continue to do the work, but it also will send more folk in Congress to us that are already fighting this fight to say, hey, I want to join in with you because I'm being pushed and pressured from my own community. So I truly believe that together we can solve this crisis and move toward a more sustainable, a more equitable and livable future for everyone. I have hope when I walk into communities and see firsthand the people doing the work. I have hope when I look to young people who are galvanizing and mobilizing around this issue. And lastly, I have hope in you and the work that we do together, the work that SEIU that you've been doing, how you've been kicking butt already, and how you pull us in, how you work together with so many to put forth transformative policy solutions to climate change. So thank you all again for having me here to speak today, but mostly thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your partnership in this fight. Together, we can do this. I just know it.
This is just amazing. Thank you so much. Very powerful. Congresswoman Bush, thank you for everything you do every single day for our communities, for achieve climate justice, and also for your being a champion. So we hear your call to action. So wonderful that you were with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite.
So now we will hear from you and your thoughts on environmental justice in your community. So I'm really delighted to introduce California SEIU 2015 member Rochelle Lewis to lead us through our poll for today. Rochelle.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Chris Rocio. It is an honor to be here and proudly represent SEIU, the union with a heart. I am a home care provider and I take care of my daughter. Oh, we're going to the poll. All right. Everybody's ready. I tell you that Miss Bush is there, as Senator Bush was awesome. Okay, so here we go. Open up a tab in the browser and go to SLIDO.com and enter the code 1641913. Or take a picture of the QR link that is posted on the screen. Use your smartphone. Once again, open up a tab to the browser and go to SLIDO.com and enter the code 1641913. Or use the QR code link on the screen with your smartphone. Okay. Here are the questions. Have you Have you or your family member been impacted by climate change and pollution? Firsthand experience with climate disaster, hurricanes and floods, bad air pollution, or smoky days, health problems, breathing, cancer, asthma, allergy, rashes, forced to evacuate, loss of a loved one due to climate disasters, worsening, heat wave. Oh, look at this. Bad air pollution, we are already up to 68%. I hope you can see this. Health problems, 58%, allergies, cancer, and rash. Let me say this. When I lived in LA, we lived next door to, or in our backyard, was oil wells. And every morning going to school was just horrendous. Just horrendous. Oh, here we go. Bad air pollution has gone up to 70%. And then I moved to Carson, California. And I'm sure if you lived in LA, you have heard about the refinery explosion. It was just disaster. And this last one was not the first one. That was the second time that the refinery has exploded and all this pollution is in our air. I am so glad that everyone is on the line today. And Senator Bush, I really, really respect her tone and her call to action. Because look, there are over 300 or more of us on this line. It may be thousands. I'm only seeing a small number. So we want you to come and participate. It's because we have, let me say me, I have basically lived my life. But we are so concerned about our children, those who come behind us. So please, I urge you to participate in the climate justice.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. This is so great. I'm glad that you were able to go into some of the questions and walk us through that. We appreciate you and the work that also you're doing in SEIU Local 2015. So now I'm so excited to introduce our plenary panel that will discuss how our work on environmental issues and climate change is deeply connected to our fight for racial justice. Leading our panel today is Bernice Miller-Travis. Bernice is an environmental justice pioneer, a thought leader. She is an executive vice president at the Metropolitan Group and is co-founder of We Act for Environmental Justice. So I want to welcome you, Bernice, and for leading this panel.
Thank you so much, Executive Vice President Science. And it's such a pleasure to be back with you, SEIU, at your climate summit. Thank you for inviting me back after joining you last year. And a hearty welcome to President Mary Kay Henry. We love to see SEIU and the campaigns that you lead. You always support community efforts for environmental justice, and you link up the work between workers' rights and community rights and the struggle for environmental justice. And so we know that we can always count on SEIU to be a partner with us in the many campaigns that are going on around the country to fight for environmental justice. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists this morning who are going to serve on this plenary. I am going to be your moderator. And our panelists are some folks who are familiar to you and some folks who might be new to you. First up will be Joseph Bryant. He's an international executive vice president of SEIU, and he's a leader known for advocating for racial and economic justice. He has led fights to secure contracts that protect public services from privatization and policies that raise wages and improve working conditions for low-wage workers. You all probably know him best for his work as a VP and leader of SEIU 1021 in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And what he is going to spend a lot of time talking to us about today is what it was like to grow up in Richmond, California, and how growing up in a place that's impacted by environmental injustices has a way of seeping into your soul, and it continues to stay with you in the work that you do. So we are so thankful to have you as a member of the plenary, Mr. Bryant, and looking forward to hearing your voice. Then we're going to hear from Mariceli Gonzalez. Mariceli is the Vice President and International Organizing Director of Local 1996 SPT in Puerto Rico. Mariceli began as a rank and file leader working in the Department of Education as a special education assistant for deaf students in 2010. And as a CODA, Children of Deaf Adults, Mariceli knows the struggles that families with disabilities go through and has used this to impact the work she does. Mariceli is very committed to the fight for better salaries, opportunities, and rights for all workers in Puerto Rico. But she's also going to talk to us today about what has been happening in Puerto Rico as they continue to try to recover from devastating hurricanes and rebuilding the energy grid, which is a hot and heavy issue right now in litigation. This very week, people have sued FEMA over how they're going to rebuild back that power grid in Puerto Rico. And Mariceli, we cannot wait to hear your voice to tell us what's happening on the ground. And then we're going to hear from a dear friend, Mustafa Santiago Ali. Mustafa is a renowned thought leader, international speaker, policymaker, community liaison, trainer, and facilitator. Dr. Ali serves as executive vice president for the National Wildlife Federation. He's also the founder of Revitalization Strategies, a business focused on moving our most vulnerable communities from surviving to thriving. And before Mustafa joined the National Wildlife Federation, he worked for 25 years at the Environmental Protection Agency in the Office of Environmental Justice. So if you want to hear some stories about what the struggle was like to put environmental justice on the front burner of the Environmental Protection Agency, there's no one better to talk to us about that than Mustafa. So help me please to welcome our wonderful, wonderful panelists for this plenary. How y'all doing this morning?
Blessed.
And it was wonderful to hear from Congresswoman Bush. St. Louis is a hotbed of environmental justice activity and has been for a long time. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my work, and then we're going to jump right into our conversation with our panelists. So I came to the fight for environmental justice 36 years ago, where I helped to organize my community in West Harlem in New York City to fight against multiple sources of air pollution that were killing and maiming my neighbors, my family in our West Harlem community. We had the highest rate of fine particle air pollution, exhaust from trucks and buses and traffic. We had the highest rate and incidence of asthma of any community in the United States. And we had the highest rate of premature death from asthma of any community in the United States. And no one seemed to be particularly bothered by that who could have done anything about it. And so we determined that we needed to build an organization to continue to inform, mobilize our community and to fight for a better future. We built an organization called We Act for Environmental Justice. And this year we'll be celebrating our 35th anniversary. So you might ask, what made you do that? Well, what made me do that was that I knew quite a bit about organizing. And I learned that from my dad, who was a shop steward for many, many years, and asked me, Local 1549 in New York City at Harlem Hospital, representing administrative and clerical employees at the hospital. My dad worked there for 36 years. And for every one of those years, he was a member of the union and a strong, strong organizer in that union. And he met my mom at that same hospital where I was born. She worked as a pediatric nurse. for 43 and a half years at that hospital and actively participated in AFSCME Local 420, one of the most activist locals in New York City. So I grew up in a union household, and I knew that if you saw something that was unjust, if you saw people who were not being protected, then one of the best things to do was to bring those people together, to organize those people, and to try and lead a sustained campaign to overturn and overcome whatever those challenges were. We found out that what was making us so sick and what was triggering the asthma were multiple sources of air pollution. And so early in our struggle, we started this organization in 1988. In 1991, there was a big seminal conference in Washington, D.C. that brought 1,700 people together from all over the US, from Puerto Rico, from the Virgin Islands, from the Marshall Islands, everywhere. People had come who were struggling with these environmental issues. And one of the things we did was to produce a seminal document called the Principles of Environmental Justice, the 17 Principles of Environmental Justice that are the foundation upon which the environmental justice movement is predicated. And I want to share with you principle number 8. We wrote these principles and we voted on these principles and we stand on these principles for the past 32 years. And principle number 8 says, environmental justice affirms the right of all workers to a safe and healthy work environment without being forced to choose between an unsafe livelihood and unemployment. It also affirms the right of those who work at home to be free from environmental hazards. There's so many other things that we articulated, but we talked about people being safe in their workplaces, people being safe in their communities, and people not being targeted because of who they were and the color of their skin, or the language that they spoke, or their immigration status. That was always a fundamental construct of what we were fighting for. So today, we are continuing to fight for environmental justice in community after community from every quarter of this country. We find that wherever people of color are, wherever immigrant populations are, wherever poor people are, they are threatened by environmental harms that threaten their very existence. Where you live will determine how long you will live, will determine whether or not you develop cancer or asthma or chronic obstructive respiratory disease. These things are all part and parcel of where we live, and we say enough, absolutely enough. And part of that being enough is making sure that our national administration, our presidential administration, our federal government is meeting us where we are and doing as much as they can do. And so you heard Congresswoman Bush talk about some really important federal legislation that's been passed to really move this conversation forward at a level that I have to say, in the 36 years that I have worked on environmental justice issues, I have never seen a presidential administration as committed to these issues, that has put more resources on the table. The office that Mustafa used to work at EPA, when he retired, had about a $10 million budget. Today, they have a $2.8 billion budget, billion with a B. And most of that money is meant to go out to communities around the country to provide capacity building, to help people address these issues, to really address what are the underlying environmental threats, to make sure that states no longer disregard the rights of these communities and local governments. There's more activity going on in the field of environmental justice than I have ever seen. And a lot of that is due to the work of President Biden. But President Biden wouldn't be President Biden if it wasn't for all the organizing that people did to make sure that everybody who could vote cast a vote. So that's the background. And now we're going to have this conversation around climate change and the intersection between climate change, looking at it through a racial justice lens. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions. And the first question goes to Mustafa. And that question is, you worked at EPA, as I said, for 25 years. You were one of the very first employees in the Office of Environmental Justice. How have you seen things change in terms of the understanding and receptivity to both to environmental justice, both within government and in the public at large? And what could and should we be doing to deepen the connection between labor and EJ communities?
Yeah, well, thank you, Vernice. Thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you to everybody here at SEIU. I really appreciate all you do all the time. Let me just start out by saying I'm a third generation union person. My grandfather was a member of the United Mine Workers of America. My father IUE, and then I was in AFGE. So I understand the need and the utility of us continuing to strengthen our unions. You know, going back to the early days of the environmental justice movement, of course, Bernice was there at the beginning. Inside of the Environmental Protection Agency was an interesting time. So first of all the advances that we now see, when Bernice talks about those billions of dollars that are there, those billions of dollars are there because of the work that frontline leaders did out of the Michigan Working Group and all the folks who were at the first the first environmental justice gathering, if you will, first People of Color Summit, moved to make sure that the conversation around environmental equity began at the Environmental Protection Agency. The office was formed in November of 1992, but Bernice, I got to just take folks back a little bit because I was thinking about these early days. William Ruckelshaus was the first administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, which started in 1970. And I had the opportunity one time to have a conversation with him. And I asked him, I said, if there's one thing that you would have done additionally in the 2 times that you were the administrator, what would it have been? And he said, I would have focused more on vulnerable communities. I would have made sure that we began our environmental justice journey sooner. And why would that be important in this moment? Because you have to remember in those early days, they were creating the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, NEPA, a number of these landmark pieces of legislation that are the foundation of the work that happens out of the Environmental Protection Agency. So what would be different now as we move forward? You know, in the early days in the creation of the Air Pollution Act, the Clean Air Act, you know, we've got right now 350,000 people who are dying prematurely from air pollution in our country. And we know it is our most vulnerable communities who are the ones who are being disproportionately impacted. They're the ones who are getting cancer, as Bernice shared. They're the ones who are getting asthma and a number of other things. We've got 60 million people in our country who are dealing with drinking unsafe water. We've got over millions of people who are dealing with indoor air pollution. And I know folks will unpack that, but I have to bring that forward because if we had began our journey earlier, we could have also addressed some of these climate impacts because we wouldn't have been placing all of these fossil fuel facilities inside of Black and Brown and Indigenous and lower wealth white communities. So when we began our journey in November of 1992, I remember walking down the hallways to one of our first meetings, and older managers were walking in front of me. I looked like I was about 15 years old back then. And I remember them saying, I don't know why we're going to these meetings because what these folks are sharing can't be true. They must be lying. Now, these are the folks who have responsibility for protecting our country, for public health and the environment. So we had to start from that positioning of having folk both inside of the agency and folks outside of the agency who were saying that there was no utility in working on environmental injustice, environmental racism, because they didn't see it as a priority or as of a need. So folks like Bernice and others began to get the science in place because the Environmental Protection Agency, 2 of the pillars that it operates off of, one is the law, the other one is science. So we had to begin the journey of being able to document what folks were saying inside of communities and be able to link up that science. Eventually, we began to move to community-based science and participatory research and traditional environmental knowledge coming in there. You know, in the early days, folks didn't see a need for resources. But as Bernice shared, we had $3 million when we first started. And that was for all the work across the country, paying salaries and everything else. So you can understand the difficulty in being able to meet the needs that stakeholders had all across the country and creating the first environmental justice small grants program. And now, as Bernice said, we've got billions of dollars that are associated with the sets of opportunities that are out there, and making sure that the voices of communities had a seat at the table and could frame out the directions that we were going to go. That's why we created the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council to make sure all the various groups across the country had an opportunity to be able to share about, one, the impacts that were happening, but also the sets of opportunities. So we fast forward now to today. We have a huge amount of people working on environmental justice throughout the federal government and those 17 federal agencies at the White House. We also now have the science that's happening in Hispanic serving institutions and historically Black colleges and universities, and a number of other institutions as well. We now have organizations. Our unions are beginning to make sure they have representation, to make sure that the policies that are being developed are helping to move the needle forward so that we both address the injustices and address the climate crisis. So I'm going to stop there, Bernice, because I know we're short on time.
Thank you, Mustafa, and thank you for that historical arc to contextualize where we are at this moment. Vice President Bryant, I could talk to you all day about the lovely Richmond, California, but I would like to ask you about your personal experience of living and working in an area where industries cared little for the health and well-being of working people in the area, of everybody in the area. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and how you brought that in to your work in SEIU, both at the local level and now at the national union level?
Sure, certainly can do, and we can find a week to set aside time for you and I just to go back and forth on this. But thank you also, Bernice, for your trailblazing work in this area, in an area that's not discussed as often as it needs to happen with impacted communities. But just thinking about the experience, I was trying to think back to the first time I knew Chevron, who everybody knows, multinational corporation, was such a bad actor and such a bad player in the community of Richmond. And I thought back to I was a kid. I was under 10 years old at the time, and Rochelle talked about it earlier. They had an explosion, and during that explosion, they had this trail of smoke that really just cut the city of Richmond in half, and hundreds and thousands of people ended up going to the hospital when that happened, and they shut down everything. They had the sirens going on in the community, everybody go in your house, lock your windows, so forth, so forth. When that happened, again, thousands of people got sick, and in response to that, Chevron actually ended up just giving out checks to people in the community. They gave out like $1,000 checks to thousands of people. And the thing that it had me thinking was, okay, just knowing that this, player was in the backyard, you got to be careful for, these explosions that happen. But then you start to think about a bit deeper about, okay, what is this company actually doing on a regular basis? They're processing 250 barrels of oil daily in the backyard of a community that is 80% people of color, and pumping it out every single day. So then you start to take the deeper dive in terms of what are the other impacts that are happening, not just when an explosion happens, but just like Bernice said, in the community that she grew up in, you see that there's asthma rates that are 2 times, not just of the country, but even the surrounding counties in the Bay Area. You see cancer rates much higher across the board. You see just so many health impacts that take place day in, day out. And I appreciate really the context of this conversation, because you have an example like Richmond and the Chevron refinery, but also within that, the community is essentially has a wall built around it of industrial polluters that take place, which is surrounded by freeways that do nothing but add additional pollution. So, and this is all being concentrated, again, in a Black and Brown and API community. So when I think about the experience and how we've approached the work and why this is so important, you cannot solely, win a, strong contract, win strong wages if you go home and you're getting sick and your kids are getting sick. So there is an interconnection and an intersectionality in regards to what we have to do to make sure to protect our members, our community, both in the workplace, but also where we live. And I'll pause there because I know we have more speakers.
Well, but I do want to ask you one more question. You started one of the first environmental justice programs within a local. What made you do that?
There's not a choice. Here in California, we've felt the impacts of drought year in, year out. We used to have an occasional forest fire, but it expanded to having a forest fire season in California, and that was not something that we experienced growing up out here. So just the constant the constant threat that our membership is under in regards to the impacts of climate change, the impacts of environmental justice, there really wasn't a decision to be able to not take a leadership role in terms of prioritizing and focusing to making sure that our members are aware, our communities are aware, but not just that we're aware, that we're taking action, as you called out before.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Mariceli, another whole summit could be focused on what is going on in Puerto Rico. Good Lord have mercy. What is going on in Puerto Rico? So can you tell us about the impacts of Hurricane Maria and the subsequent hurricanes, but also the vulnerability that communities are experiencing all over Puerto Rico, and what is being done and what needs to be done?
Definitely, yes. There's a lot to talk about Puerto Rico. But as you know, Maria was a big struggle for us. We still are trying to recover from Maria. And I think that we talk about Maria, but we have to remember that a week before Maria, we have Hurricane Irma that struggle part of the east part of the island. So just after a week of Irma, we had Maria that devastated the whole island. I can talk by my experience and how Maria devastated the island. I live in the central part of the island in Barranquitas, in the mountainous part. And I remember that I always, when I talk to Maria, I said that it looked when I finally had the chance to get out of my house because I felt safe. I talk about how everything looked burned. It was like a bomb was dropped. So it was a very impact image that it stays with me. But not only that, I remember that I was 6 months without electricity. And 66 days without water. And that was for me. But I knew from members that they had to wait 8 months to get power. And some of them are still struggling with the power because unstable, because it's privatized. And the work that is doing Luma, it's not a good job. We have been having raised on the bill. The senator was talking about, the congresswoman was talking about how the bill it increases every time. And since Luma came, we've been having 8 increases in the electric bill. So our members can afford to have more sustainability, how to pay them, and it's not in a stable system. And this is why we are struggling to try to recover. When we talk also why we are not we're so ill prepared for other hurricanes, not only hurricanes, but we also had an earthquake like 2 years ago, you remember, on the southern part of the island. Now we're having a lot of rain, and the rain comes with the flooding and everything. And it's because the government is giving a lot of construction permits without the proper studies of ground, proper studies of water. And this is affecting especially poor people, the poor communities, the workers communities, because they are constructing on the areas that are for the wealthy. And it affects our workers, our communities. So this is also part because of our colonial status. Puerto Rico is a colonial of the United States. So we don't have a chance to determine and to say how the federal funds are gonna come and how it's gonna be distributed. We don't have the chance to say that. So there's a lot of billions of dollars that FEMA said that it was gonna be designated to Puerto Rico to reconstruct the power grid, but we are supposed to make it sustainable, to make it a clean, efficient, but that's not what the government wants to do. So it's a really hard fight that we're doing.
It's an unbelievably hard fight, but I have to say the people of Puerto Rico have taught us what resilience means, because you all have fought and continue to fight, and including on Wednesday, a number of organizations in Puerto Rico got together and sued FEMA for trying to build the old electric grid back the way it was, instead of doing more resilient, more green energy things. Can you say a little bit about that, Mariceli? Does that have a lot of support across the island? That fight with FEMA?
Well, that fight with FEMA, we need to educate more our members. We need to educate more what it means, but definitely the communities, the organizations are getting together, because as you say, you cannot fix something that is unfixable. You have to make something that it's gonna be energy efficient. You have to do something that is gonna really attempt on we're always gonna have hurricanes. We are in the Caribbean from June to November. It's the hurricane season, so you have to build according to that. And government and FEMA has to know that, and they have to treat us like first class citizens, and they're not treating us that way. And they have to know that we have the right to decide how we want to rebuild our power grid. And the communities are the people who gets it's the basic need. Power and water, as they were saying, are basic, and it's the right for the people to have them. And it's not right for example, in Puerto Rico, for being a private sector, if they're gonna be stealing the money and not doing what is right for the people.
Well, we have run a little over time. You all have been magnificent, but I want to ask you one closeout question. What do we need to do to make sure that communities of color, low-income communities, working class communities are not left behind as we try to fight back against the ravages of climate change? I'm going to start with you, Joseph, then Mariceli, and close out with you, Mustafa.
We represent over 2 million families in the US, Canada, and Puerto Rico. We have a huge microphone to be able to make sure that the issues that Black, Brown, API communities are dealing with from a climate impact lens are being put at the forefront, using it at all levels, from local politics, state politics, obviously federal politics, but also using it at the table. One of the things that many of our locals have been able to do is to bring up impacts of climate in Black and Brown communities at the bargaining table with employers, and making sure that the concerns are being heard. Because when we think about winning a contract, again, if we're not making the difference also within the communities that we live in, we're leaving opportunity on the table. So using our voice at any and every level, and again, doing this, I mean, it's amazing that we've had over 500 people here, 500 members, amazing partners like Bernice, Mustafa, Congresswoman Bush coming together. So we must unite and use our voice to its full capacity to make sure that we're making change.
Thank you. Mariceli, what do we need to do to make sure that our people are not left behind again?
Definitely raise our voice and keep the fight and continue to educate. I think the most important value that we have is to educate our people and let them know what is happening and that they have the power to change things. And if they are capable to use their power, because we have been doing it, and not only, and we have the political power, we have to do it. We have to make them changes and see that if we get together, we can make the change, the politicals that we need to make, to address this climate change in our favor.
And Mustafa, from the colony of the District of Columbia, what do we need to do?
Well, mi abuela says that you have power unless you give it away. So as Joseph and Marcel had shared, we got to utilize our power. First, you got to understand that you actually have power. So many people are afraid of that word because there's responsibility that comes with it. We can make sure that we're educating our folks to help them to understand the power that exists inside their vote. We can make sure that we are demanding and building commissions to make sure that these trillions of dollars, and Justice 40 gives 40% of those federal benefits, are supposed to be going to our most vulnerable communities. But if we don't put, if we don't hold the states and commonwealths and other things accountable, those dollars may not make it to our communities. So we also have to make sure that the death rates and sickness rates that continue to happen inside of our communities because of pollution, that we are focusing upon that and making that change happen. And then we've got to also make sure that the contract and subcontract opportunities that often do not go to our communities are now focused in that direction. But it starts with us realizing that we have power. I know you're closing out, Bernice, but I'll just ask everybody, if you truly believe that you have power, can you drop that into the chat in whatever language that you use to have conversations with folks? Just say that I have power or that we have power, because we have to start to make sure that people understand that dynamic and that we're utilizing that power for good.
Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you all for a wonderful, wonderful conversation. We could have talked about hours about each of the things that you all are working on. EVP Science, I want to turn it back over to you to take us forward. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you so much, Bernice, for leading this conversation. Mustafa, Joseph, Mariceli, thank you for your attendance today and for your dedication for creating healthy, safe environments and working families. And as Bernice says, what do we need to do? And we heard about continue to build power. We know when we join together with our co-workers, we'll build power. We build the strong voice, as we all know, when workers come together in unions, as you all know. We need to act. We need to stay on the streets. We need to unite and link arms with our partners and bring the fight to the halls of our federal state capitals. We need to press our employers to create cleaner and healthier workplace, and we need to vote. We need to elect climate champions, champions like you heard Congresswoman Cori Bush, champions who fight for working people in our environment. We urge you to join, act, vote, so our union can continue to make a bigger impact towards a sustainable future. We urge you to join, act, vote to make a bigger impact. Together, we can make a difference and create a better future for ourselves and future generations. So please take a moment to sign up through the link that is provided and is being dropped in the chat. That is about how we will continue to stay close, join, act, and vote. So really, thank you so much for everyone and your dedication in this important issue. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Andy to move us into breakouts. Now the conversation is going to go into our division for these breakups. So we will close the formal summit and then open our networking sessions. So thanks everyone for this part. Stay as we're moving into the breakout groups. Andy.
Hi, these are a little different than you might have experienced before, so please pay attention. We have 3 breakout sessions today, separated by division. One for healthcare workers, which includes hospitals, nurses, nursing homes, clinics, and home care. One for public employees, for those working at local, state, and other public agencies, education, childcare, and nonprofit agencies. And one for property services, which includes buildings, operations, and maintenance, janitors, security guards, and airport workers, and those working in related fields. If you fall under none of these categories, feel free to choose which one is the best fit for you. You can join any of the sessions on Zoom by following the instructions below. For those in the healthcare breakout, this is important. You won't need to do anything. We will stay in the room that you're in right now, so don't go anywhere. For those in the public and property service division breakouts, we will be leaving this Zoom meeting and joining a separate Zoom. We had to do it this way to be able to provide translations for all the various languages in each breakout. So if you are in the public breakout, please find the link to that Zoom in the chat and click on it and it will take you to the room. You will get a message that says leave and join new Zoom. Click on the button that says leave and join. Again, if you're in the public breakout, please find the link to that Zoom now in the chat. Click on it and it'll take you to the room. Give everyone a moment. Now, if you are in the property breakout, please find the link to that Zoom in the chat now. Again, if you are in the property breakout, please find the link to that Zoom in the chat now. If you have registered for the summit, these instructions are being emailed to you now, so you can check your email if you need more information. Refer to that email if you have any trouble, or you can email breakouthelp@seiu.org at the email listed in the chat now. That's breakouthelp@seiu.org. And they're going to put that in the chat. So you can either check your email, there's instructions there, or you can, if you're still having trouble, email breakout help. And one more time, for the healthcare breakout, you don't need to do anything. It will be held in this very room. If you are joining us from your phone, please see the instructions and link in the email we just sent for the link for your breakout session. So we'll give everyone a few minutes to get in place. Thank you.
Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? They paved the paradise, put up a parking lot. Oh la la la, oh la la la. Late last night, I heard the screen door slam, and a big yellow taxi took away my old man. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? They paved the paradise, put up a parking lot, yeah. Oh la la la, oh la la la. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? You paved paradise, put up a parking lot. Oh, they paved a paradise, put up a parking lot. Yeah, what's up? I said they paved paradise, put up a parking lot. I didn't want to end.
Your screen. Give it one more moment. Okay, now I'll introduce Maria Castaneda, Senior EVP of 1199 SEIU, Chair of the Environmental Justice Committee, to lead our healthcare breakout.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our health sector breakout. I'm sure all of you are like me, overwhelmed by the power of the speakers that we heard in the previous panel discussion. But I guarantee you that this healthcare sector breakout will be equally powerful because we will hear from great speakers and inspiring members to share the stories. So please do not leave the room and let's stay until the end of the meeting so we hear our members and guest speakers in their presentation. So without further ado, I'm very proud to introduce my fellow leader in 1199 United Healthcare Workers is EVP Lisa Brown to introduce our first great speaker. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. And yes, Maria, it has been a really powerful summit so far, and I'm hoping that it'll continue that way. And I am proud and honored to bring to you the video of our governor of Maryland, who we fought hard to get into office. And because of his progressive ideas on how we should handle things, that we can't take time to do some of the work that needs to be done. Wes Moore released a comprehensive plan to build a cleaner, more prosperous Maryland. In January of this year, the plan includes commitments to generate 100% clean energy by 2035, protect our environmental assets like the Chesapeake Bay and other waterways, combat the pollution that disproportionately burdens low-income communities and people of color, as well as to appoint a chief sustainability, mitigation, and resilience officer to ensure coordination, accountability, and enforcement of these goals. I'm hoping that you will enjoy his speech, and now we will hear from Governor Wes Moore.
Hey, SEIU, it's Governor Wes Moore, and it's my honor to welcome you to the Climate, Jobs, and Justice Summit. I am proud to be your partner in working to build a better state for all of us, while also addressing the issue of climate change. Because every day you're on the front lines. You're on the front lines of the essential industries that deal with the effects of climate change. And so when people ask me, they say, well, how does climate change show itself? My answer is simple: in every way. It shows itself in the air that we breathe, in the water we drink, in the resilience of the communities we live in. And no one knows this better than SEIU. Many of you are the first responders to climate disasters. Many of you serve in industries that support communities dealing with public health hazards caused by climate change. And you're not just dealing with the effects of climate change at work, you're dealing with them at home as well. And we also know that when it comes to the effects of climate change, it is not distributed equally. Communities of color and low-income communities are always the most vulnerable. So as governor, it is my mission to build a state where we leave no one behind. And how we address climate change is at the forefront of that mission. It's why our administration is working to address climate change in a way that prioritizes environmental justice and ensures that our workers are protected, respected, and paid. Because climate change is not just a challenge, it's an opportunity to build a green economy that provides our workers with pathways to work, wages, and wealth. We are moving to invest in clean energy industries and create jobs. We are moving to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 60% by 2031 and achieve net zero emissions by 2045. And we are investing in critical infrastructure to help lift all of our communities and secure our future. And you all know that SEIU is a core part of that future. So together, we're going to work in partnership to address climate change, to ensure environmental justice, to build a green economy where all of our workers can thrive. So thank you. Thank you for your leadership, now and always. And I'm proud to stand with you today, and I'll be proud to stand with you as we work to make this Maryland's decade.
Thank you, Governor Westmore, and I will look forward to your leadership and very powerful message for all of us this morning. So today, as I said, we will have equal strong presentation of speakers and members. And so just to do a quick run on the agenda, we will hear from our member, an expert in climate, member of local SEIU 503 in Oregon, a state that we all know have been battered by crisis, climate crisis. Then we will hear from members of SEIU in various unions that will share their work in sustainability projects in their hospital, in resilience training program in the nursing home. I will be speaking on why healthcare workers should care about climate justice, and our speaker and also our leader from Minnesota who will share with us how electoral campaign and legislative agenda can be used to deal with climate change. So it's a lot of great presentations. So I'd like to call on our first speaker, Dr. Pradna Garud from 503, Local 503.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for the introduction. Before I begin, I just wanted to thank Nicole for giving me this opportunity to speak to the fellow unionists, and big shout out to SEIU organizing team for putting such an important event together. So the title, can you pull up my presentation? Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So the title of my presentation today is Climate Change, Public Health and Role of Labor Unions. Next slide, please. Here is a quick overview of what I will be covering in this presentation. Firstly, how climate change impacts human health. Second, the intersection of climate justice and health equity. Then I'll give you a brief historical background of union interventions to protect health and environment. And then I'm making a case of unions as a vehicle to achieve climate justice, and how building union movement is critical in supporting community climate resiliency. Next slide, please. In public consciousness, when we talk about climate change, it usually evokes images of ecological disasters, such as polar ice caps melting, polar bears being affected, and rising sea levels. Comparatively, much less emphasis is given to the impacts of climate change on human health. In this presentation, my focus is to show how climate change is a threat to public health, and how growing unions and union movement can help us foster equity and resilience for labor force and for community health. There are two main ways that climate change directly impacts human health. Firstly, by changing the seriousness or frequency of health problems that people already face. For example, people suffering from respiratory illnesses like asthma are more vulnerable to wildfire smokes or industrial air pollutants. Secondly, by contributing to new and unanticipated health problems in communities. The climate-driven extreme events such as prolonged high temperatures, drought, floods, hurricanes increase the risk of infectious and non-infectious diseases and malnutrition, and affect mental and overall well-being. This means climate change is inseparably linked to health. Next slide, please. Human health is profoundly shaped by social determinants of health. So now what do I mean by social determinants of health? It refers to social conditions where people are born, raised, live, and play. These factors affect health outcomes and drive health inequities. So communities that are affected by structural racism, poverty, housing instability, food insecurity, exposed to violence, etc., have poor health outcomes, such as low life expectancy, persistence of chronic diseases, and infant mortality, just to name a few. So as I mentioned in my previous slide, that climate change worsens existing physical and mental health illnesses. Similarly, it severely undermines livelihoods, equality, and access to healthcare and social support structures, all of which are determinants of good health. And these climate related health vulnerabilities are disproportionately felt by communities of color, poor and working people, migrant families, and people with underlying health conditions. This resulting in deepening health inequities. So, in a nutshell, as a consequence of capitalist economic systems and profit motives, not only exploits labor, and large amount of green gases are emitted, thereby worsening climate change and in turn harming physical health and overall community well-being. Next slide, please. Historically, labor unions have played a monumental role in promoting health and protecting our environment. Here are a few examples I wanted to highlight. 1946 United Mine Workers Welfare and Retirement Fund established 8 hospitals and dozens of clinics in Appalachian coal fields, making healthcare accessible to workers. Union support helped pass Occupational Health and Safety and Health Act of 1970, Federal Mine Safety and Health Act of 1977, Employee Retirement Income and Security Act of 1947. The United Steel Workers lobbied for Clean Air Act of 1970 and subsequent legislations protecting environmental and environmental health. And the recent example is the role of SEIU's grassroots level mobilizing in helping pass the Inflation Reduction Act. Next slide, please. I wanted to present this brief historical context before us to show the interconnectedness between labor, health, and environmental issues. Some public health researchers and practitioners have started to consider the decline of unions as threat to public health. Studies show the low labor union density often results in reduced health and safety standards. Union power is not only a tool to address economic inequalities, but also a vehicle to organize and achieve climate justice. Next slide, please. In this last slide, I just want to quickly talk about climate resilience. In simple terms, climate resilience is building communities' coping capacity to minimize the impacts of climate change. In my view, the clearest path of achieving climate resiliency is through building strong democratic unions. Union contracts help each one of us improve our incomes, get paid time off and leisure time, gain access to healthcare, enhance workplace safety culture, provide predictable scheduling, and protect workers from discrimination and unfair treatment. From public health perspective, all these are primary determinants of health that are fundamental in creating climate resilient communities, which our union movement can play a crucial role in building. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Pradna, for your presentation. And now I would like, if you have any question for the panel, please write it on the chat and we will go over that after the panel speakers. So what I would like to discuss right now is why healthcare workers have to care about climate justice. We know as healthcare institution, we always say that, can you please put my slide? Thank you. Okay. Okay, so the next slide, please. Okay, so we said that healthcare institutions' mission is to provide quality and safe patient care to our communities and the people we care. We are a center of healing, wellness, and well-being. Next slide, please. But unfortunately, our healthcare industry itself is responsible for 10% of US greenhouse gas emission. It is contributing to the climate crisis. Next slide, please. As healthcare workers, we know what the climate impact on our day-to-day life. Extreme weather events like hurricane, flooding, heat waves, wildfire disrupt healthcare delivery. The need to evacuate patients, absorb surges of patients from affected communities, staffing shortages due to impact staff, damage, and infrastructure. We feel this every time there's a climate crisis. Next slide, please. Prior to COVID, we are dealing with this climate crisis. And in the last 3 years, we said that our communities are impacted by this twindemic, climate change and COVID-19. Pre-pandemic, we said that number one public health threat was climate change. And with COVID, it became the twindemic public health threat. Next slide, please. Many times we say that genetics has something to do with your lifespan, but we are all saying now that zip code determines your health. Zip codes with the highest pollution rate also have the highest number of COVID cases and death. Next slide, please. Since I'm from New York, I would like to share the case study that we did in the Bronx. The Bronx, one of the biggest borough in New York, has the second lowest life expectancy of any region in New York. The highest COVID infection rate per capita. Racial composition, 56% Hispanic, 29% African American, 9% white. 27% poverty rate compared to 15.6% in all of New York County. 20% of Bronx children have asthma, 8 to 12 times higher than the national average. And that's why the Bronx is called the asthma alley in New York State. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. So that's my last slide. And now I would like to call on Caitlin. She is a registered nurse, a member of SEIU 1991 of Jackson Health System, who will share with us their projects on hospital sustainability in Jackson Memorial. Caitlin?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Great to be with you all today. Great to be with some powerful healthcare workers who are committed to sustainability and environmental justice. Like Maria said, my name is Caitlin McLaren. I'm a nurse at Jackson Memorial Hospital here in Miami. Our hospital is part of the Jackson Health System, which is the public safety net hospital health system for Miami-Dade County. And our local SEIU 1991, a few years ago, we created a climate committee. And I'm going to be talking today about our progress, what we've been up to, where we're hoping to go from here, and hopefully it will provide some ideas for some of you who are interested in getting into this work or who are already doing it and looking for other ideas. And hopefully we can have a great conversation today. You can go to the next slide, please. So just a little bit of background. A few years ago in, I think, 2019, right before the pandemic, we created a subcommittee of our union. We call it the Climate Committee. I know some hospitals have green teams or sustainability teams. We called ours the Climate Committee. And this really came about because a member approached our local president and said, you know, this is an issue that I'm very concerned about, worried about. It's really weighing on me heavily. And, you know, I just wonder as a union, is there something that we can do? And so we put out the call to the rest of our members. We sent out an email saying, are you worried about this too? Do you want to do something? You know, come join this climate committee. And so over the last few years, you know, despite a lot of difficulties during the pandemic of getting people's attention on anything other than just surviving and doing our jobs, we've managed to build out this committee. And we ultimately brought it to our management at Jackson because we have a formal labor management partnership, our union with our hospital. And so we approached them and said, you know, is this an issue that you guys would want to work on together? So, you know, they agreed. And so we formed this partnership. And, you know, initially, you know, some of the work that we had done as a committee before we formed the partnership was just kind of gathering information. So we would meet with different departments and kind of find out what's already being done at our hospital. And we talked amongst ourselves as workers about things that we saw at the hospital that we thought could be improved, things that we saw that were wasteful. And ultimately, after doing some research about best practices at other health systems, we identified the opportunity of joining Practice Green Health, which is a nonprofit organization that has memberships of hospitals and health systems that are interested in this work. And as a member, you get consulting services in doing sustainability work. So we put together a presentation to our management and said, we think that this is something Jackson should do. We know that in Miami, climate change poses an existential threat to our community and to us. This past week we had a bad rainstorm, not a hurricane, not a tropical storm, but just a bad rainstorm that flooded streets, flooded people's homes, forced people to evacuate their homes. People were trapped for hours in their cars in the parking garage at the Fort Lauderdale airport. It shut down the airport. And this is just from some rain. And so we're really underprepared and very concerned that there's a lot of anxiety here about this. And so we said, this is something that as the health system, we need to really take this on. And they agreed, and we became a member of Practice Green Health. You can go to the next slide, please. So a little bit more about our committee and what we've been doing. One of the big pieces of being a part of Practice Green Health is that we have to complete this application every year, where basically we enter a lot of data about what we're doing at the health system. So we enter data about how many kilowatt hours we consumed over the past year in our buildings, about what kind of anesthetic gases we're using in the OR, what kind of chemicals are in our products that we're buying. And so it's really been an enormous effort that has forced us to work, or given us the opportunity to work across many departments and across many hospitals within our health system to try and collect this information, and has given us a better understanding of kind of where we're at, what our baseline is in terms of sustainability work. We also do staff education and engagement activities. This morning, we did a beach cleanup for Earth Day. We've done tree plantings. Around Earth Day, we always set up a table where we can engage staff and talk to them about the work of the committee, and educate them about things like, which bin is the appropriate bin to put items in, because people aren't familiar with where, what actually goes in the red bag versus the regular trash, and what can be recycled and what can't, and what are we collecting for reprocessing, et cetera. And we formed, this past year, we formed several working groups. So we have a greening the OR working group. We have a buildings and chemicals working group. We have a waste and procurement working group, food working group. And there's one that I always forget, but it'll come to me. And so this is a way for us to really drill down in these areas and try to figure out what are our opportunities for improvement at Jackson. So one thing that came up was, I participated in a meeting with a bunch of people from other, areas around the county talking about sustainability. And they mentioned a request for proposal that was happening for county facilities to get some rooftop solar. And I inquired more and found out that Jackson, even though we're a public hospital, we hadn't yet been included. And so I was able to connect them with Jackson to make sure that we got included in that RFP. And so that's something that we're doing right now. So just having people who are engaged and looking out for opportunities is just kind of one of the things that we're doing as a committee to try to make sure we're taking advantage of anything that's out there to make us more sustainable. You can go to the next slide. So some of the things that we've been able to do so far, and on the right side of the screen, you can see that's a screensaver that we have. We regularly share information with our staff about the climate committee through these screensavers. So some of the things that we have done so far as a committee, we committed throughout the health system, make all of our operating rooms smoke-free. So some of you, if you're OR staff, you may know that sometimes when surgery is happening, smoke is created from, the process of creating incisions, and that everyone in that room is breathing in that smoke, and it can have hazardous chemicals in it as well. And so all of our ORs are now using devices that capture that smoke so that people in the room aren't inhaling that dangerous, smoke. We created a green purchasing policy for the hospital so that our procurement department is aware of some of the considerations that they can be making when choosing products. We eliminated desflurane from our operating rooms. That's an anesthetic gas that is a major greenhouse gas contributor to the warming of the planet. We're picking new products that can replace some of our styrofoam products in the cafeteria and inpatient areas. We even added electric vehicle charging stations to some of our parking garages. We've added more plant-based options to the cafeteria to cut down on our meat consumption, because we know that although that's extremely popular and kind of, it's a challenge from a marketing perspective, we know that meat is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. You can go to the next slide. So what's next for us? Our overall goal is to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of the health system by 50% by 2030, in line with some of the other kind of pledges and commitments that health systems and other institutions have made. Within that, we want to reduce our regulated medical waste by 50%. I mentioned before the process that we've gone through of collecting our baseline assessment, and we identified this as a real problem within our health system, that we produce a huge amount of regulated medical waste. So that's the red bag, like the biohazard waste. The problem of this is that waste, before it goes to the landfill, it gets processed. So it gets autoclaved or it gets incinerated. And so there's the additional, in addition to just generating waste that's going to get buried in the ground, it also wastes energy and creates greenhouse gas emissions. And so we, through staff engagement and through changing the placement of some of these red bag bins, we are trying to reduce our regulated medical waste. I mentioned earlier, we're trying to add some rooftop solar. We want to track and improve our procurement practices. So to minimize or eliminate, where possible, products that have, flame retardants or antimicrobial substances or anything in it that are chemicals that can be hazardous to human health, including the staff who use it, as well as the patients who are using it. And then finally, we're doing some research and engaging different stakeholders to figure out how we can best take advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act and some of that funding that hospitals can take advantage of through tax credits and things like that, to make it possible for us to do energy efficiency projects at our hospital. You can go to the next slide. So finally, just wanted to say, if any of you are interested in creating a green team at your hospital, some questions that you can ask yourself and find out about at your hospital. Does your hospital already have a sustainability department? I know some hospitals do. Has your hospital joined Practice Green Health? That's not the only way that you can do this work, but it is one way that many hospitals are doing it. So it's worth knowing if that's already in progress. Has your hospital signed any of the pledges? There are a million pledges out there. Healthcare Without Harm has a pledge. The White House has a pledge for hospitals to commit to reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. And then finally, who else in your hospital wants to join you? Like I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, the beginning of our committee genuinely started with just sending an email blast to all of our SEIU members at Jackson and saying, hey, who's interested in doing this? And just having a meeting, and like 30 people showed up, and we, started from there figuring out what we want to do. And so that's a great first step, is to just identify other people who want to do this work with you. So thank you all so much, and look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, Caitlin, for your innovative and leadership in this project. And we have 300 healthcare workers in different locals that are in this healthcare breakout. And I really would like to encourage all of us to think about what we can do in our own union to pilot this initiative, because we hope to replicate it in many of our health systems. And when we did our survey of our health systems, many of them are signatories to the Practice Green Health. Many are already driving. If you look at their website, they are bragging about driving their sustainability. But if we're not inserting our voice, this will just be a management-driven initiative in our institutions. And as you can see from Caitlin, there's a lot of initiatives that workers can do to really achieve this goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So, and right now we have in our pilot committee, we have members are 1199, we have 1199 Northwest, 10 to 1, Healthcare Minnesota, Healthcare Illinois, Healthcare Canada, UHW, CIR. So I welcome and invite many healthcare workers to start thinking of how we can do some piloting in our healthcare institutions. So now I would like to call on Jigme Ugen, who is the Executive Vice President of Healthcare Minnesota and Iowa and a fellow API caucus leader. And he will share with us their electoral campaign and legislative agenda that will drive climate change in Minnesota. Welcome, Jigme.
Thank you, Maria. Well, greetings from Minnesota. It was over 90 degrees yesterday. It's currently raining outside, and we are expecting snow tomorrow. So we don't know if we should turn on the AC or the heat, and that's about all the seasons happening this week. But the reality is that climate change is real, It's serious, it's dangerous, and is the greatest threat facing our planet today, and we are running out of time. Before I start, I wanted to take a moment to thank John and Nicole and everyone involved in organizing this incredible summit, and to our chair, Maria Castaneda, for her vision and her unmatched passion fighting for climate justice across the planet. So let's show them some love, send them some heart emojis. Come on, folks. They've been working really hard on this. Some heart emojis, some claps, anything. Encourage, and let's keep this committee going. Well, hello, siblings. My name is Jigme. I'm the Executive Vice President of SEIU Healthcare Minnesota and Iowa, and I don't have a slideshow. So my home country is Tibet. Tibet is also called the world's third pole because it contains the biggest ice fields outside the Arctic and the Antarctic. It plays a key role in the global climate system. Like 500 million people in Asia depend on Tibet's river system. Currently, Tibet is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world, and the impact of the melting glaciers has been catastrophic. Scientists are saying that these glaciers will disappear by 2050 at this rate. So my country is suffering because of other people's greenhouse gas emission elsewhere in the world. And we see it here in this country. Our society has been structured to benefit some people at the expense of others. Climate crisis hits communities of color, women, immigrants, refugees, and the poor the hardest. So how do we fight and demand change? Earlier in February this year, Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz signed the 100% clean energy bill into law, which requires all Minnesota utilities to achieve carbon-free energy by 2040, requiring 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. This is a landmark bill, y'all. It is one of the strongest clean energy standards passed in the United States. But it wasn't easy getting there. But also knowing that in Minnesota, we currently have a trifecta government, it made it a lot easier. For 4 years, we mobilized. We went to lobby, testify, rally, protest, showed up in these lawmakers' meetings, and we worked closely with climate groups, environmental justice advocates, youth activists, and faith-based organizations. So it took a lot of effort, an entire village to take on the fight. Just to break down the law a little bit, under the new the law, utilities will need to reach 80% carbon-free by 2030. That's 7 years from now. And 90% by 2035. And like I said, 100% by 2040. And I'm sure a lot of us, or our children, or our grandchildren will still be around. This isn't too far. While we were doing this, we also insisted that the Public Utilities Commission maximize the workforces and equity benefits, like creating high-quality jobs, recognizing the rights of workers to organize, ensuring workers have what they need during the transition. They get the training and everything that they need from when they transit from their current jobs to a carbon-free energy work, especially around the environmental justice areas. So while we do that, we've been doing a lot of work internally. And I want to take a moment here, an opportunity, since I'm speaking, to recognize our member Vice President, Leslie Kopp, who's here today. And Leslie is with us today. Leslie was just nominated and appointed by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's commissioner under our governor to be on the Environmental Justice Advisory Group, which is an incredible honor for the union, the labor movement, and for all of us. So just like Leslie, we have many members who are actively representing us at various tables and boards when it comes to climate, our climate warriors like Eric Imler, who I think is also here, who represents our union as a board member for the Minnesota Blue-Green Alliances. I wanted to really kind of pin what Caitlin talked about is like having an active committee. We have an active climate committee. We call them the Climate Warriors of Healthcare Minnesota, comprising of members and staff. And we also have an in-house staff group who regularly conduct an environmental audit with our local. When and as we talk through this, and I think we've heard this theme right through the day, our members know firsthand the impact of life-threatening pollution and extreme weather events. And we also know how our members are, again, disproportionately hardest hit by the impact of climate change. Here in Healthcare Minnesota, we are proud to test the success of 1991 Jackson Health System on the hospital sustainability work. We all understand the footprints, the carbon footprints that our hospitals have, our clinics, our nursing homes. We want to look, and in fact, we want to have discussions with the employer where our members, all of us will be saving money from these hospitals. And what the money saved, what do we do with that? Bring it back to the table and give us, make it into wages. So how do we transfer those money? And how do we tap into the IRA? Those are so many interesting things that we're talking about, the practice green health. Like when we talk about climate justice, our chair, Maria talked about it, it isn't a distant thing. It isn't just what's happening in Tibet. It's what we do on a day-to-day basis at work, how we are moving around and what kind of things around the hospital, what kind of boiler rooms, which rooms have the lights running, which door just opens up, let's say, air in. So many things to talk about. The hospital, I deeply encourage all of you to go back to your leadership, to your staff, and talk about ways we can work to create the hospital sustainability so that the carbon footprints from these hospitals can be erased, and we are in the front fighting that. So with that, I wanted to hand it back to the chair, but it is incredibly powerful being in this room with you all, being a part of this summit. And again, to all the folks who've been doing the work on this, we have to continue doing this and bring it to the forefront and have more members involved and get these employers and these lawmakers listen to us so that we can make that change. Thank you very much and have a fantastic rest of the day.
Thank you, Jigme. Thank you, Jigme. Thank you, Jigme. And now I would like to call on Corinne Eldridge. I know she's pressed for time, so without further ado, I'd like to present Corinne. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to meet you all and lovely to see so many folks here today. I'm Corinne Eldridge from the Center for Caregiver Advancement, SEIU Local 2015's Training Center. And I'm here to talk to you about our Caregiver Resiliency Teams program, which is how to prepare home care workers and nursing home workers on how to prepare for, respond to, and recover from climate-related emergencies. Next slide, please. So I think everybody knows, we've heard so much in this summit this morning, the real need for training and how extreme weather, all the climate-related emergencies are affecting all of us. And for caregivers, both home care workers and nursing home workers, they've expressed an urgent need for this training program because they've increasingly found themselves as first responders during climate-related disasters that threaten the consumers that they care for, as well as residents. Next slide, please. So this training program was developed in conjunction with a variety of partners. We just completed the piloting this program. We trained 515 caregivers in 13 months. Split between home care workers and nursing home workers. And when we think about those who we indirectly impacted and indirectly served, that leads to about 3,500 individuals, knowing that home care workers typically take care in California, most of them take care of a family member. And for every nursing home worker, depending on the number of residents at a facility, they likely impact about 10 plus individuals. Next slide, please. So this training program was developed in conjunction with what the requirements were for the funding, and that is looking at the high pollution burden in zip codes and census tracts within California, as well as the population characteristics of low-wage workers. And we trained both BIPOC and immigrant communities who are home care workers and nursing home workers. And where you see the red dots and the blue dots, that's where the workers lived and worked. We trained in both English and Spanish, given that this was a pilot program. And you'll hear more about the other languages that we'll train over time. Next slide, please. So who we trained, the majority of the workers trained were female, roughly about 79%. The majority of workers took the class in English, and that's because of the way that we pilot our work. We needed to make sure that we did rapid cycle feedback and ensure the content was accurate and that it resonated with workers. And so only after we did that were we able to move it out into Spanish. And what's, I think, typical for both home care workers and nursing home workers is the age range. So it's in line with the majority of home care workers and nursing home age ranges in California. Next slide, please. So our curriculum was very much based on the need of what we heard from workers, from employers, from union leadership. And we focused on climate change itself, the connection to care, vulnerability, mitigation and adaptation, with emergency preparedness, hard skills around ensuring that person-centered care was a focus, emergency planning, focusing on community resources, and community resilience like psychological trauma, secondary trauma, and self-care for caregivers. So there was a series of information building and knowledge building, as well as hard skills that workers learned. Next slide, please. So we had a variety of subject matter experts that we brought in to help us develop this training curriculum. You can see their names on the slide deck here, but no, we included a consumer voice. So that way those with access and functional needs were represented. We had those who develop emergency CERT training programs. We had community groups, and we had some SEIU experts on climate and environmental justice, who I'm sure you've heard from through this summit today. Next slide, please. We included all of the needs of workers, consumers, employers. We included our subject matter experts through a robust stakeholder advisory committee process, and we continued feeding back to that group. So that way, when we got feedback from the workers who were in the course, that we made updates to the curriculum so it resonated the most with the workers. Next slide, please. The partnerships were very key to the success of this program. First off, this was funded by the California Workforce Development Board through the High Road Training Partnership Program. Of course, Local 2015, employers including Los Angeles Personal Assistance Services Council, the employer of record for home care workers, and then a variety of skilled nursing facilities across the state. Next slide, please. Our impact is quite large, and the impact studies that we have done for this particular program have a lot of data and a lot of outcomes. Next slide, please. I'm just going to go through about 2 of these slides because there's a lot of data here, and I think they'll be sent out, so you should be able to see the data in more detail. But post-training, so we did pre-training surveys, post-training surveys, and at the end of the training program, 99% of workers trained strongly or agreed with that they're confident that they could keep the person that they care for safe during an emergency. And 99.5, it's almost 100%, agreed that they've learned new caregiving skills because of this training program. Next slide, please. When we look at the overall outcomes of both home care workers and nursing home workers, there's a significant difference in the pre-training knowledge versus the post-training knowledge. And this is statistically significant, which is important as we continue to think about how we can expand this training program across the state. Next slide, please. So there's a variety of data elements in the next few slides. I'm not going to read them out loud to you. What I want you to note is the significant change between pre and post. And that really emphasizes the value of this training program to home care workers and nursing home workers. Next slide, please. I think we're going to go one more. Keep one more. And so all of our training programs ensure that we have economic enhancements as part of this work. And so workers received payment for hours in classes, as well as a stipend upon completing the training program. We're not yet at a place where there's wage increases associated with this training program, but that's absolutely part of our strategic work with the union. And then there's emergency kits, CPR certificates, and then SEIU credits for certified nurse assistants who took this training program. Next slide, please. So next steps for this training program, we're really excited that we've been able to include this program as part of our work with the state. And so we are training in 8 different languages through the Career Pathways program for IHSS workers. There's about 2,700 seats available. And then we'll also be moving this work with some new funding from the High Road Training Partnership Resilient Workers Fund in San Bernardino County for about 500 workers in English and Spanish. And so we're excited to be able to expand this. We know it's not the number of seats that we need to get to all workers across the state, but with the continued impact studies that we're doing for this work, we're really hopeful that we'll be able to move policy so there's more access to workers all across the state. That's my piece of the presentation. And I know we have one of our students, the fabulous Ana Garcia, who is here, who is ready to share with you all what her experience was in taking this training program.
Hello, sorry about that. My name is Ana Garcia. I had the pleasure of taking a class with CCA in the fall of 2022. I'm caring for my brother for 13 years. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about this class is opening my eyes to new ways of caring for him, such as the heat waves. With his condition, it's very important for him to have AC. So it really prepared me for having like a backup plan in case there's power outrage, to have a plan B. Also to help him evacuate in case there's a disaster. Also, there is a lot of things that we as caregivers think that we know and we don't really have the skills. So this class prepares us to be prepared in case there's a disaster, such as having like an emergency plan for contacts, putting your stuff, your important papers away, having lists of phone numbers that are important, reaching out to your community if you have any questions to go to the disaster areas. And I really enjoyed this class. And I think everybody that's a home care provider should take it because it helps you be a better provider for your consumer. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna,
Thank
for
you, Anna, for
your story.
your
And
story. And
I don't know if there's a echo from my side, so I'm not sure if. But I want to open the floor right now for question and answer or comments you want to share. Please raise your hand if you have any question. Some of our team members will help me identify the speakers who has a question or questions on the chat. Okay, I see Julianne Fisher from 2015. Can you unmute yourself, Julian?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So much great information throughout this whole thing, but the most recent one about how to have maybe an emergency kit or the medication list for the person you're caring for available and updated. Thank you for all the many things you've been mentioning, all of the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Betsy, do you have any question in the chat? I don't see any hand. Any raise hand? I'm sorry, I don't see it in my screen. So Betsy, can you help us if there's any question on the chat or someone who has raised hand? I don't see it in my screen right now.
Maria, I can Lorenzo. Okay, I got unmuted. I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead. Maria, we've had some questions along the way. Everyone would like, there's a lot of requests for sharing your presentations. We had a question of, does anyone know how climate is impacting the homeless, and how is there any statistics on that, or anyone looking at the homeless to get statistics in major climate events or disasters?
Anyone from our panel can feel free to answer the question.
I can take that real quick. There are a lot of studies that are taking place, at least in my knowledge, by Portland State University, specifically on homelessness and like the impact of climate change. So I'm happy to pass down those research to people who are interested in reading it.
And also, I would like to add that since we're talking about this, I've had discussions, but like there's a huge sort of accusation on the homeless community that they generate a lot of pollution, which is not true. And we have to acknowledge that homeless encampments and all those that you see around who people forced to live in there do not generate pollution. And because of like anyone else, as we live excessively, I just wanted to note that. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Any other question?
I think there's other hands up.
Okay, I cannot see the hands up, so Betsy, help me.
Yeah, Lorenzo Gonzalez.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right, beautiful. I guess it's a comment and / question as well. I think, I'm part of the local CIR SEIU, so we represent training physicians. And this is something that many people go into medicine because they're passionate about climate change, because we understand its manifestations into disease later on and what you all were touching upon. I think one of our biggest issues, and I really like the highlight of the Jackson Health System, where we also have a shop there, is being able to spread that across the nation to other areas where we're currently at. And I think that really comes down to, in my opinion, having a limited amount of folks that consider themselves leaders enough to be able to lead something like this from probably scratch. And I was reflecting on that and saw the exact what y'all were presenting towards the end, where y'all were training caregivers as a possible solution to be able to create this like network of leaderships that then be able to then go into our local shops and establish things that are very similar to the Jackson Health System. That was the kind of like tying it all together for me. And I was wondering if anybody has been able to develop something where we're able to take folks that are passionate, give them the similar to the way we train folks in labor to become stewards and be able to become then, union leaders and take on these huge bargaining fights. I feel like there is a parallel here when it comes to being able to do this at a local level, to be able to then implement their work and their desires for climate change and to materialize something tangible. And I hope someone has like some idea how to do that. And I'm piecing things together, but those are my comments. And I think there's a question somewhere there if anyone wants to answer it.
Thank you. And that's the reason why we in the Climate Justice Work Group developed a subcommittee on the healthcare sustainability project, because we would like this work group to focus and dig deeper and implement what Caitlin just shared with us. So we hope that CIR will be an active partner in that work group. Thank you. Okay, I see now in my screen the hand raised, so I'll call on Lorenzo Gonzalez.
That was, I think.
Okay, Lorenzo is not there. What about Maurice De Paulo from my union?
Yes, I am here, and I just want everybody to know, I work with Maria on a close level. I'm on the council of 1199, and I'm so glad to be here and support her in this. I've been part of climate justice with 1199 for a long time, and you touched on what's going on in Florida. I bought a home in Florida in 1995. I want everybody to know, and I never saw what happened recently. I know they talked about it today, but I actually had a flood in my home and never did in my life since I owned that home, that people had to go in and had to pump the water out. I'm very, very scared. All the airports had to be closed. The roads were like tremendously. I saw pictures and I just can't believe it. If this is what's happening to our country, we need to get, I'm glad I'm part of this committee. Thank you. And I'm sorry for the noise in the background. Thank you, Maria, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Maurice. So I'll call on Vanessa Sistrom. Vanessa, are you there? What about Amy?
I'm trying to unmute and somebody kept
Okay,
muting
sure.
me back. Okay. Hi, my name is Vanessa C. Strong. I'm from Local 1000, which is in California, state workers, and I'm a registered nurse. And I was just very interested. The information was very good and very appalling. And I was wondering, is there a way that I could get this information so I could share it with my local?
Yes, definitely. We will. This summit and all the presentations are recorded. All the PowerPoints can be shared, and we will have newsletter regularly that will share projects. So, all the participants here, we will be definitely connecting with you as part of our climate justice movement within SEIU. So thank you. So let's call on Jesse Preston. Okay, Gisela Thomas, USW. Oh, I don't know what happened now.
Unmute. Did I unmute myself?
Oh, okay. So
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi. Yeah, this is Gisela Thomas. Hi, Maria. This is Gisela Thomas. I'm with SEIU UHW out here in California. Black maternal health is a real issue in the area where I live, and is particularly impacted Black and brown mothers to be and preterm infant. Is there anything, and a lot of it has to do with the environment, is there anything you're doing at this level to address that, or is there anything that is being done in that level, incorporate that?
Any speaker would like to address that question? If not, that's a great question, and we're here to hear what feedback we have and what we need to do moving forward. So thank you, Giselle. If that could be an issue that we can definitely.
Great information in the conference. Thank you.
Thank you. So I know we're running out of time, and there's still a lot of hands raised. I would like to at this point, aside from, we will have another opportunity in our networking to discuss this more, but I would like to just discuss the call to action that we would like us to commit to do between now and moving forward. And as we heard all this crisis we're in and what we can do as healthcare workers, as frontline healthcare workers, as 2 million strong union. And what we would like to do is, as a union, we are going to do our part to hit our 2030 climate goal of keeping warming to less than 1.5 degrees centigrade. Over the next year, the Biden administration will be issuing more than a dozen rules to curb pollution, and so that the communities of color will be protected, and it will help reach our goal. We need to bring our power of SEIU 2 million members to this effort. We need to build a response network to members committed to sending comments to the EPA and engaging locals into action. In our chat, here and on the screen, you'll see a link with a QR code to sign up for alerts. Please sign up. It will only take you a minute and be part of the movement to hit the goal of 1.5 in 2023, and sending your comment on the EPA right now. So if you can use the QR code to sign up. And are we committed to this movement together to fight climate change and save our planet? Raise your hand or unmute yourself. And then what we would like to do is to transition to, I think the call to action is a way of trying to wrap up this healthcare division sector, but we would like to continue the discussion in the networking session, because I see there's still a lot of hands raised, and we don't want to miss the comments and the questions that we have from our members. I don't see.
Now it unmutes.
Okay.
I wanted to ask how we could get training like the one in California in other states.
What local are you from?
I am from local 503 up in Oregon.
503, okay. Actually, even me, what our goal in this presentation is to share all these different initiatives, and then locals who are interested, like you or even me, my local, will get together with your local and share how they went about in training, in accessing the funding and the training that they have. So someone will be in touch with you, and I know Nicole and John is taking notes of this. But we encourage every local to see what opportunity that they can get funding to get training for our frontliners. So any other comment, raise hand, or you want to speak, just unmute, because I cannot see. Or do we transition to the networking?
Yes, we can transition to networking now.
Okay, so I want to thank everyone for this attention that you gave to the healthcare sector breakout, and we have lots of things to work to do, and we look forward to your active involvement. And now we are transitioning to the networking session, which is intended to just give everyone who have a question to raise question, ideas that you want to share with one another, and just learning from each other. So we want to hear from you now. And Betsy, are you the one moderating this networking
Yes.
session? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there. It's been great. We've had such great speakers. I've learned so much. This is just, we have until, well, we're going to lose our translation, unfortunately, in about 3 minutes. So if you need translation, that's going to stop in about 3 minutes at 1:45. However, you're invited to stay on. Anybody that would like to just comment on what's going on, talk about what's happening or your plans, questions, how do we do this? Just let me know how, we'd like to get some feedback. And we have some hands up. Can we unmute? Just go ahead and speak if you'd like. How about Gordon?
Okay. Hi everyone. Yeah, so I too work with physicians at Jackson down in Florida. So I was actually there this week, to witness the rain that came. But I also am based in Chicago as well. So in Chicago in the Great Lakes region, we tend to focus on access to fresh water. And with I know a lot of this presentation and the conference in general was focused primarily on the coast and how climate change has affected the coastal areas. And I wanted to know if anyone in particular was thinking or working on region-specific initiatives, particularly around the Great Lakes region and, in some of the flyover states that have less access to fresh water and its impacts on not only, the communities, but specifically on our members and members of color.
Do we have anybody that has that information? It's certainly, one of the Michigan seems to working so well on these climate change from what I heard. What just from I'm in Florida, Betsy Marvel, I'm from Florida. What I think is so important is that, and what we've seen with these, with the Clean Water Act and what drains into what, is that it's so important to have a national policy on clean water in addition to the state policies, because I know in Florida, everything that comes down the Mississippi and collects all the pollution along the way dumps into the Gulf, which comes over to the west coast of Florida. And so we can have, if we did have all the great regulations, which we don't, for clean water, it would have no effect. So I think is that what you're talking about with Michigan is?
Yeah. I mean, like not only pollution, but like delivery systems, all these things I think, will come into play in the next few years. Like in Chicago and Illinois, right? We typically would have 4 seasons, right? What we just experienced was just like an overabundance of rain, collecting in our piping and watering systems, and I'm really worried about our ability to manage what climate change will look like for the Midwestern region and for the Great Lakes region in general. But also I think that goes into play in some of the other areas of the country that don't necessarily have access to fresh water. The Colorado River is continuously shrinking, so all of those communities in the Southwest as well, will eventually have, to deal with the consequences of climate change in the access of fresh water. So, I know that we were really concentrated and focused on like the impacts of climate change and pollution, but there was really almost no mention of fresh water. And I just want to make sure that this group is really thinking about that and what those impacts will entail, because I'm sure, just like everything else that affects and impacts people throughout the country, that poor people and people of color will be impacted by the loss of access to fresh water more than anyone else. And what do we need the most to live, right? That is water, so that is something that is really keen in my eyes, and something that we should definitely be focusing on as we talk about climate change.
So Gordon, can I invite you to be part of our committee, because I think you are bringing a very good perspective that it will be helpful, so you can help us shape the agenda of our climate justice work.
For sure. I'm here and CIR is here, to step up into these.
I got your name. We will definitely invite you to our meeting. And this is the role of the networking.
And now once Maria takes down your name.
Okay. So let's call on others.
Okay, it's Javetta. I was finally able to unmute myself. It wouldn't let me unmute. So I finally was able to unmute myself, and I live in Richmond. I've been living here over 50 years. And there was a guy on earlier in the beginning, and he was talking about the Chevron refineries. We have Chevron Shell and Chevron Research. We have all those refineries in Richmond. And I was just wondering how to get a hold of him.
Oh, that is our Executive Vice President, Joseph Bryant. He is our EVP for SEIU International.
So from Richmond? That's the guy said he was from Richmond?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe we should, with the presentation, send out an email with contact information for the speakers.
Yeah, because I put my email in the chat, and I would like to get involved. I have nieces and nephews and cousins and everything here in Richmond, and we're experiencing these issues.
Yeah, I'm jotting it down.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And we have, is it Saveg?
Javetta. Oh, no, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Siva Jamali, and I'm from Northern California. I'm with Local 2015. And just in response to the gentleman who was just talking about clean water, California has several communities that are Black and brown and immigrants who have had bad water, and they're trying to get clean water to them. So California has already experienced the clean water issue a lot. And also, I just wanted to find out, after everything's over said and done, how do we get parts of this? I know it's been recorded, so how do we get a hold of the information later on down the road? And also the training that the last speaker spoke about for caregivers. I would love to get that here in California. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that is in California.
Oh, it is California.
Yes,
okay.
That's a California initiative.
Okay, I didn't get that far. Thank you.
Yeah, so you're good if you're in California.
So Betsy, did you get her name? Did you get her name?
I'm Siva, CEVA Jameli.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know if I want to give you my name though.
Okay. Well,
then you sign me up for things.
If you can use that link, we had the QR code up, that link for response to SEIU. Then we can, well, we have your registration too, right?
Yes, you do.
Okay. So we will be, everyone will be contacted by their locals.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
And everything has been great today. I just want to say that. You guys have been great speakers.
We are running out of time. I think we can get 2 more and then we wrap up.
Okay. How about Amy Amy?
Hi, my name's Amy Mesa. I'm a
public health nurse, Santa Cruz County, California, local 521. I just wanted to say that the whole day was really inspiring, such inspiring speakers, and that I hope that it would be really nice if there was an email to follow this conference that would maybe just have a super short summary of each of the speakers, who they were, what they talked about, and then some of the links that they provided in their messages, like, the practice green health link and all those different things that people highlighted. And if they're open to being contacted, that would kind of address the last two people who had their hands raised. I think everybody wants to be able to take the energy that's generated in these kind of forums and, really jump on it. You don't want to lose that momentum. So it would be really nice to have like a email call to action go out immediately following this. And thanks for everybody who did all the work around this summit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's in my to-do list. So now I think the last speaker, Gladys Bruno.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Gladys Bruno. I'm from 1199 SEIU, New York City. And I would just want to say that I had the opportunity to go to Puerto Rico a month after the Hurricane Maria hit. And like the other sister said, how the island, the mountains, everything looks so black. But thankfully, nature does what it has to do. And as the days went by, you could see everything turning green. But I say this to say that I found myself thinking about my family that lived there and how are they prepared. So I made sure that, they had a generator. I made sure that I even found like cordless, wireless shower, just portable showers. I found I'm looking into getting a water reserve, solar phone generators, a landline. So and now with going through the summit is making me think of how prepared are the hospitals when it comes to natural disasters. And I remember when COVID hit, I made sure I asked management, do we have a stockpile on PPE? And things like that. And this is just making, as a jobs committee coordinator, it's making me think, how can I connect all this to that work? And in the hospitals, about all the gases that come out, our workers are our members affected by all that. So it's just making me think of all this. And, I thank you for this summit. It's very good. It's very important. And I'm looking forward to continuing the work. I feel it in my, in my soul that this is one way that we all need to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Gladys. And now you're part of my Green Justice Committee. Thank you. So this is great. I think the purpose of our networking is to hear other ideas of what we need to do, because we were all inspired to save our planet. Everybody has a role to play individually, as a local, and as a state, and as a country. So definitely thank you all for your active participation. I think we are closing this program now, and thank you for really staying with us in the entire program. Thank you, and we hope to hear from you in our different state level committee and local work. Thank you so much. Now, meeting adjourned, right?
Yes. Thank you, Maria. Thank you,
Thank
Betty.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ate Maria.
Good
Thank
afternoon,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Gracias. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Gracias a nuestros traductores por su excelente trabajo. Como siempre es un placer.
Gracias, Patricia.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.